Daniel McLaughlin.
What's up, everybody? Hi. So when Christopher asked me to be a part of this event, I was really flattered, and I was like, why would anyone want to hear stories about the restaurant industry? Like, what could I possibly illuminate that already hasn't been done by the writers of the Vanderpump Rules or any of the myriad cooking shows that are out there? But then I thought about it, and I was like, of course, there's a ton of stories that people outside the restaurant industry or even inside the restaurant industry kind of find hilarious or fascinating or kind of unreal. Like once when I had a family come in with a child-sized lifelike doll that they ordered food and drinks for and talked to as if it were real for like an entire 2-hour lunch. That's something that happened. There was a happy hour, like a really busy one that was at Oyster House when I worked there, that became less happy when a woman's gun fell out of her purse and onto the floor. Turns out she was a cop, so that makes it like a little more okay, but it was still a tense moment. And my favorite, which I still can't believe actually happened, was when, like during a dinner service, there was a big burly kind of biker-looking guy who had, was just like casually enjoying some tacos when it came to be revealed that he had secretly smuggled in his pet snake in his leather jacket. These are things that happen in my line of work. And they don't seem like things that are fairly standard for somebody's like typical day-to-day. And I tried to like translate that experience to other people's jobs and think about like Beverly from accounts receivable wandering into your cube and finding you there with your python. It's like not something that really happens in the restaurant or outside of the restaurant world, I don't feel like. And anytime I mention what I do for a living, I usually get the like, oh eyes. Like, oh, that's cool, or oh, you must be crazy to deal with all of the things you must have to deal with. And it's true, like there's a lot that comes with these jobs, and often I get to the end of my day and look back at all the things that I've accomplished, and I'm a big list maker, so I cross things off as I go, and I look at that list sometimes, and I'm like, a mere mortal would have curled into a ball and died if like halfway through this day, because there was just so much that you manage with people's emotions, with vendors, with guest issues, and it's just something that, you can go to school to study food and beverage, or like hotel restaurant management, but it doesn't necessarily equip you to be hospitable. And what does that mean to learn hospitality? So that's part of what I wanted to talk about here today was how one learns to become hospitable and what would compel anyone to pursue a career in this industry, and why I think and feel that this industry kind of chose me. I pursued a lot of different career paths here in Philly. I actually moved here from DC to pursue a degree in architecture at Drexel. So that was like my first life. And then I went on to make furniture, had like a little company with a friend, and we did custom woodwork for people. I then studied nutrition for a while and did a lot of experimenting with diets. And eventually I took a job managing the Oyster House for a friend of mine, just like kind of as almost a favor, because he was out of luck on the search. And I was like, I can do that. And so I did. And turns out I was pretty great at it. And after a few years of experience, I had a fellow manager at the time turn to me, and like after having a completely frustrating day, and he's like, Daniel, I want you to teach me to be just like you. And I was like, no. And I laughed and I said, in order to do that, you would have to travel back in time, and you'd have to be born into my family, and you'd have to grow up in my household. And it's true. It's like the things that equipped me to be good in this industry, I think, are things that only happened because of where and how I grew up. And having some years of experience to review and many, many, many hours of therapy, I was able to realize and even to appreciate that twisted upbringing made me especially equipped to assess and manage crazy, which is essentially what all work in restaurant management is. So that is my story here today. I grew up the second youngest of 5 kids in DC. My dad worked for the government. My parents were actually from Philadelphia. My dad moved down there because of work. My mom was a stay-at-home mom. There were 5 of us. And they were extremely religious, like not Sunday Catholic take communion once a week religious, like next level born again crazy Christians, like talking in tongues, running the pews, passing out, prophesying, the whole thing. So that was what we grew up with, and God informed everything in our house. So we read the Bible every morning. We had to discuss what we read at breakfast. We weren't allowed to watch TV aside from like the news or football or golf, which were kind of religions in their own right in our household too. And there was no music allowed. The only music we ever listened to was Christmas music. And not like year round, we weren't that weird. It was just like, but I remember like having the record player and like ritually dusting that off every December and taking out like the Burl Ives album that we listened to while we made angel-shaped Christmas cookies. But never Santa-shaped Christmas cookies, because that was far too secular. So that was my house life. And then on the other side of that coin for me was where we lived, was Southeast DC 18 years ago, and going to a public DC high school, and that was a live experience. So huge school, like 2,500 kids, predominantly black. There's a smaller, sizable like Asian population, and then there was really a handful of white kids, and I was one of them. And I was this beaming beacon of pallor and fiery red hair. I literally looked like the Target logo, and I might as well like have that one painted on my back for as much as I got messed with. But it was an interesting experience growing up as like a white cis male as a minority in this place, and having to split my life between this home existence that was very wholesome and Christian and controlled, and this other world that was completely liberal and lawless. So those are the two sides of my coin. But to describe that target, it did feel figuratively and literally true. Like I got picked on a lot, got called all kinds of names, and everybody could see that I was just like this small white Christian kid who was clearly smart and very clearly gay, and that was their favorite trait to pick out. So it's like, of all the things they could have chosen, like my hand-me-down clothes or, you know, my lack of pop culture awareness, the gay thing definitely seemed to be everyone's favorite, which in my little teenage hormonal brain was so confusing. It was like, physiologically, I was like, yes, I want, like, men are hot. I want to get up on that. And then at home, I'm getting like the brainwashing of a religious experience that tells me homosexuality is not real. And then at school, you know, even though I didn't entirely understand what it meant to be called a faggot, I knew it was something I didn't want to be. So for 4 years, I just endured and tried to do my best to like keep my head down and hug the walls and just kind of power through, and developed all these fun like psychological devices that allowed me to do that. And I got to a point where I could just hug those walls and look out, and understood that if I could make everyone else around me feel comfortable, that they would leave me alone, and that they would forget to pick on me or to hit me, and I could just be. And so I between home and school, got pretty adept at that particular superpower. And it wasn't all bad. Like, I mean, I was rooting down, yes, but I was branching out as well. I made friends. I had moments of love and support. I joined junior ROTC, which is so funny to me now because it's so not who I am. But it was cool at the time because it was a bunch of nerds, and you know, it was structure and it was leadership. Like I kind of rose through the ranks literally and became a leader in that. And it was also provided just some security. It was just some camaraderie and things that I wasn't getting elsewhere in the school. So eventually I, did well in school. I got a scholarship, and then I came up here for college. I was young. I skipped a grade in elementary school, so I was actually 16 when I graduated high school, and then in that summer turned 17 when I started my freshman year. So when I got to Drexel, it was like, this is great. It was like total freedom. I was on this urban campus. I was living the dorm life. I was meeting new people. And all those people were there to learn. Like, all of a sudden, you were paying to go to school, and you weren't just like being obligated because it was some public high school thing. It was like these people were unapologetically smart. And it was one of the first moments I felt at ease, because it was like, oh, these are my people. Like, we're reading and stuff, and it's cool. I started as an engineer, actually, and my freshman year, and then I switched over to architecture because I've got a decent creative streak, and so it was much more satisfying doing the design stuff. And then after that, did all those other things I talked about earlier. But the biggest event, the most formative event, I'd say, of my life was the summer after that freshman year when I got my first job in a restaurant. And I lied on my resume. I used my older sister as a reference and got a job at a restaurant that doesn't even exist anymore. It was on 20th and Market in the Commerce Square Towers. And as fate would have it, when I was there for just a few months, I happened to wait on Steven Starr. And this was years ago. He only had 4 restaurants at the time. I had no idea who this person was, but all my fellow server cohorts were like, oh, do you know who that is? Do you know who that is? And he's like, Budokan. And I was like, I don't know what that means. And so I must have done a decent job, because he right then and there at the table, he offered me a job. He's like, hey, I'm opening a new restaurant on campus. You should go apply. He gave me the manager's name and the number that I should call, and I went, and 3 months later, I opened Pod, which is still there, which is crazy to think that was the year 2000. And more so than the school experience of getting to be with the nerds, this was where I really felt at home. Opening a restaurant is one of the most formative, most bonding experiences you'll ever have. Because we look at all those weirdos. There was just people from all walks of life, all different ages, races, and for the first time I was interacting and working regularly with other gay people. It was the first moment in my very early, very new adulthood that was a thing. And while it didn't quite register at the time, it was a very formative moment. And it wasn't my debutante ball or anything. I didn't start sashaying out of the closet. I was all newly myself, but it felt comfortable. And even though I was still young, I was still using all those devices that I'd learned, where I was just kind of hugging the walls, observing, making sure people were cool with me and cool about me. And I was a good student at the restaurant. I studied all my menus and was good at all the things. So I thrived there. I worked there for a couple years, and it was where I first started having my most open friendships, where you just learn to be yourself a lot more because no one was holding back. So you could let the freak flag fly a little bit. Even Anna, who's here with me today, was a friend that I met there, who I'm still friends with now, and she's been one of my greatest champions and counselors and inspirations, also videographer. But I can extrapolate the benefits well beyond even just that friendship, how many relationships I've taken from my restaurant experiences. And this coming Sunday, I'm having my 10th annual Friendsgiving, which is a big deal, and it's going to be 107 of my closest friends coming over for dinner, which is not an exaggeration. It's a big thing, and I know that all of those relationships came because of the restaurant industry. Christopher Plant, met through the restaurant industry. He's the reason I have my house. He's the reason I'm on this stage. It's the reason that I was able to travel and form my passions and explore myself, and now I have my own restaurant. Crazy. Mission Taqueria is 2 years in, and I love it so much. And I feel I've grown up with Philadelphia, and in a way, Philadelphia has grown up with me. And while all those technical details are wonderful, what this industry means is, above all, is that it allowed me to be me and to feel accepting of myself finally, and allowing a space for others to do the same. and that being a weirdo or gay or cultured isn't a bad thing. And in fact, that's kind of a winning combination when it comes to success in the restaurant industry. But it's more like in hugging those walls that I appreciated the value of real connection and how we as humans just crave that so much. And that when it's real and you feel the love and all the tender parts that come with those connections, that's all you want. That's all I wanted when I started feeling that. And that's why I now have this loving network of support, both professionally and personally, that all came through this restaurant. It's why I can have 100-person potluck, and that's just my life now. And to hear Antoinette talk earlier about what your Rocky story is, I feel like that's mine. I now run a restaurant that I'm so proud to say has become a safe space for the members of the LGBTQ community. We've been doing all kinds of collaborations where arts and food collide. At the moment, we're doing an Art at Mission series that's actually with Conrad Benner from Streets Department, who I think is speaking later today. So he's helping us curate different artists that can showcase their work in our courtyard, right in the center of our dining room, and be seen by hundreds of people a day. And then they actually get paid to do it, and it's not just like a loner situation. They actually make money from us. They make money from the sale of the pieces, and that feels really great. We host drag shows and the Phillies Foxes. We've got great connections with them. Queer in Public is still our art show that's up right now that features 3 young muralists from the Philadelphia region. And it's just it's such an honor for me to be able to now host these members of this new community that I've created for myself and allow them a space where they can come and feel completely comfortable being who they are. And it feels like I'm no longer hugging the walls, but that I am the walls, and that I am allowing for that space to be real for many more people beyond me. So I love this city, I love my place, and I'm so truly grateful to Chris for letting me be a part of this, and I thank you all for listening.